Welcome into another episode of the podcast. Will Highland joined with Kyle Diezel. Kyle, what is up?
Not much. Enjoying a nice warm weekend. How about you?
I'm doing well. I mean, yeah, it was great. You woke up today and you heard the birds chirping, walked outside, you smelled some fresh cut grass. Got a little tan this week. You
hmm
can't tell, but I did. Got a haircut. I mean, I'm feeling it. It's spring. Looks like you're feeling it with that jersey. Those of
I am feeling.
those of you watching on YouTube, he's wearing a Devils jersey, as you can see, and those of you listening on audio, you'll just have to visualize the red and black, just like Putty from Seinfeld. He's here. So yeah, actually, let's start with that. How do you feel about this Devils game that they just finished with Carolina a few minutes ago?
I felt great. I mean, I was worried the first few minutes going into it, but once we scored that first goal, it was just like rapid fire, bang, 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 bang. Like we were just scoring left and right. I was just so happy we were able to find the back of the net finally for the first time in 9 games, more than 3 goals. So it's a great turnaround, kind of similar to the Rangers series that we played. I mean, we fell to them 0-2, and then we fell to the Hurricanes 0-2, and then we somehow turned it around and won 8-4. The only thing I was disappointed about is that we gave up 3 shorthanded goals. That was the only concern I have. We have desperately sucked on the power play. Like it's just been awful in both series, both the Rangers series and the series. We can't do anything on the power play. We play great 5-on-5, gives the man advantage. I don't know what we do.
Yeah, it sounds familiar. I'm just gonna move on from that though. We're not gonna talk about not gonna talk about that. Maybe we will when we talk about the Panthers and the Maple Leafs in a second. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, I think you guys are. I say you guys like you're in the locker room with them, but you know what I mean. I think the Devils are certainly a team that you can't sleep on. With what they did against the with what they did against the Rangers in the first series, falling behind, losing the first two games at home. That's what makes these series a little bit different. And you know this is you lose the first two games, but now Carolina, now they got to play a game four again in your building, coming off of that loss that they had today. So the momentum is different when you're the road team, and even if you lose the first two games on the road, if you get back home, as you guys found out today, sometimes you can solve the series pretty quickly and flip it back in the other way. Ironically enough, and I guess I'll use the Panthers as an example from last round, is that's not what they did, right? Like they won game two in Boston and then they lost game three and four at home. Ultimately, we know what happened in the last three games of the series, but I think there's different ways that a team can look at the way that the series is unfolding, and for the Devils, I think if they go into the fourth game and they know that they now feel like they might have been able to solve a little bit of the offensive problems that you noted, not being able to score more than three times in 9 games. If they get confident in Hughes plays well and those young guys continue to play well, and you get you get Carolina sort of questioning um, how long this series could go. This is something that the Hurricanes ran into against the Bruins last year in the first round. Ultimately, they won the series, but it looked like they were in complete control, but then they forgot how to play hockey on the road. And if the Devils are able to um, make make hay at home in Jersey, in Newark, then by the time you get to a game seven, even if it's down in Raleigh, anything can happen. So I think that you should come away with this as a Devils fan feeling that if you can get through this series, I think you guys have a great shot. Obviously, you'd have a 50% chance, but you'd have a great shot at going to the Cup. Because I think Carolina is your biggest test yet in terms of the hardest matchup for you guys.
I think so too. I mean, they're matching speed for speed compared to when we played the Rangers. Rangers
Right.
weren't a speed team. The other question is for next game is for both sides is who do you start as goaltender? Like Anderson gave up, I think it was 3 goals, 3 or 4 goals to start. And your backup just gave up another 4 goals. Who do you start? And then who do you start for the Devils? Do you go back to Schmidt or do you stick with Vanacek? Yeah, but 3 of the goals today were shorthanded, so it's not like it was his fault personally. So I feel like you stick with Vanacek. I mean, either goaltender's
I
great. I
would.
think I don't.
I would. I think he's got
I
a bit more experience.
um, but the question is for the Hurricanes. Like, who do you put in net now? Like, and plus, are your goaltenders going to be shaken up
So did they have?
after?
Did they? So they? I'm sorry. I haven't. I've been too depressed to watch hockey in like 6 days. So so I've lost track of who the Hurricanes have started. So did they start with Frederick Anderson and then go to Ronta or the other guy there?
They started Anderson. They allowed 3 in the first, and they
Yeah.
scored within the next 2 minutes into the second period. Pulled him right away, and then put I forget his name. Starts with a K. His last name starts with a K. I can't
Okay.
remember.
So they didn't. It's not Ante Ronta. It's the other guy.
Like the other guy was sick actually, so he's still out. They don't know if he's going to
Okay.
come back for the next game, but
Yeah.
he's out ill. But it still begs to differ for the Canes if this is what the Devils just showed. Like Heischer scored, Timo Meyer scored, Jack Hughes scored,
Right.
and then you implement Brandon Smith back up in the lineup, and you added Luke Hughes first playoff postseason game in the NHL. Like everyone's starting to find their stride. You get a little bit worried that like, okay, these guys just scored 8 goals.
Yeah, didn't that happen against in the Rangers series? Was it game 3 or game 4 that New Jersey had the
Game 3 was the overtime winner that started the fuel, and then they started to light them up in started to get a little bit more. Game 4, they started to light it up, and then it was I think game 5, they score, I think 4 on the Rangers because one was an empty netter and they don't count against average.
yeah.
So Shesterkin still only allowed 3 goals.
Right. I mean, so okay, so this is a good chance for me to sit back. Um, you guys listen to this program, you know that I was high on the Rangers. Ultimately, I think what happened to that team is, and they fired their coach this week too. Um,
Correct.
really what I think happened to the Rangers is unlike the Bruins and the Lightning and the Avalanche, I think the Rangers failed to meet expectations because it's 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 possible that they were never really that good to begin with. Um, Now you could say that
I
about
think,
Boston or Colorado um, or or anybody else, Tampa, but nobody was really. Everyone kind of thought Tampa was different this year, but I think with the Rangers is maybe I was watching Fool's Gold all year long, right? I expected a team like them to turn the page and be better in the playoffs than they were in the regular season. Whereas a team like Colorado or Boston, right? Like they were pretty good during the regular season. Boston was amazing during the regular season, and so they could only really go down. New York, I thought, had
correct.
the ability to like put it in another gear, sort of like what the Devils are doing, and they just didn't. So maybe they weren't ever that good in the first place. And ultimately, Shesterkin can't win them every game, and we've seen this happen with goaltenders in previous playoffs. I mean, last year, Jake Ottinger couldn't win Dallas their first round series against Calgary despite
Nope.
being playing amazing, right? So sometimes your goalie isn't enough. And I think that's something that New York ran into. Would you agree? Because I mean, I thought they were going to win the cup because Shesterkin was going to play so well.
Yeah, I mean, Shesterkin was basically kind of like when Marty was ours. It was defense first, and that's the same point of the Rangers. But I think the big issue that we've seen so far, most of these teams who made these last minute big deals this trade deadline are basically all out the playoffs, except for I think the Maple Leafs right now. The only team that's made more than 2 big trades before the trade deadline. I could be wrong. But they're the only team that's still in it. But they're down 0-2 till Carolina, who only signed
Florida.
Florida, who just signed Matthew Tkachuk this offseason. So the big question is, does chemistry play a big factor into this? Like, I thought the Rangers were better before they made all these trades. Like, they were consistently playing better.
Yeah,
Once they made those trades, they're
and they were
freaky.
essentially the same team that brought that brought Tampa to
Last year.
the East Finals last year. Yeah. I don't know. So here's the weird thing is, like, I thought that Carolina would have been in trouble um against the New York Islanders for a little bit, the way that series started. Um because New York, like Florida, right? Like Seattle,
Yep.
wasn't playing with a lot. And meanwhile, the Hurricanes had subtracted. We've been talking about teams that have added. The Hurricanes lost Svechnikov to an injury, lost Max Pacioretty to an injury, and there's a third player who they lost to injury, who I know Brody, who's listening, is yelling at me that I should remember this, but they lost a third big piece to injury in the I think maybe it was Aho for a couple of games. I honestly can't remember, but you thought that or not you, but like a hockey fan would think that might be that team that struggles. But they took care of the Islanders in 6, and then but it was these teams that added. It was the Bruins, it was the Lightning who gave up a boatload of draft picks for Tanner
Yep.
Janelle. Right? Like, it was these teams that went out and added that struggled, and I don't know. I'm not willing to count the Leafs out right now, but at the same, I mean, that Florida's won 5 playoff games in a row, and 3 of them were with their backs against the wall, to the Bruins, and then they went on the road to Toronto, which is one of the most hostile environments in the league, and won their first 2 games. So, I mean, like, who knows? But I think you're right. I think maybe chemistry does play a factor. If you sign these guys or bring in these guys into the locker room in March, and 6 weeks later you're playing do or die minutes in the postseason, maybe it's not as easy as just bringing Patrick Kane or Vladimir Tarasenko in off the street.
Correct. I mean, we're going to really have to see what happens. I mean, is our team's going to let these guys now walk to go to free agency, or are they going to try to do something else? I think the big thing that speaks volumes, I think, right now is that for a team like the Devils, the future of the NHL might be changing up a bit, that you look more to the younger talent who's just becoming much, much more faster and not as skilled yet, but do you go to the approach of, do you stick with the superstars who are currently in the league, or do you go with a team overall who's younger, less experienced, but also is faster, which could change the entire NHL and how it looks?
Maybe. I mean, I was just pulling up a list of pending free agents. There's a lot of old guys on this list. But
Do they go for the money, or do they go for the cup is the key question for those guys.
So I think it varies based on the team. Like with the Devils, like, I think you guys, no matter what happens, you're not going to bring Meyer back. Probably not. He's probably going to go to a team like maybe Washington or somebody with a ton of cap space, or I don't know. I just pulled Washington out of a hat. I don't actually know if they have a lot of cap space, but it seems like they will, because they sold a lot of guys at the deadline that were UFAs. But I think with your team, I would not try and go too cutthroat in the offseason, because you bring back Mindy, your coach, he'll be back, and you've got the young studs, the Hugheses. I mean, Jesper, what's his name? What is
Jesper Bratt?
Jesper Bratt, yeah. You got Jesper Bratt. I mean, you got more talent than you want to do it right now. I would not push the envelope too much, but I also wouldn't be complacent either. Like, if there's a better defenseman out there that you could grab, or to bolster the top 4, then maybe do that. But I mean, some of these teams, like, I think the Rangers are going to actually be okay. And they gave up a
Yeah.
lot of draft capital for Tarasenko and Kane, but I think they'll be all right. I think Carolina is probably going to be the one team to look at and say they might not be able to hold it together for too much longer. I mean, this is really the time because you've watched Boston and Tampa exit in the first round, and it looks like Toronto's might be heading in that same direction. They can somehow get by the Devils and hold off them, and then they play Florida. I mean, this, despite their injuries, this would be the year that they should go for it. That they won't want, that they'll not go for it. They have, they brought in guys, but this would be the team that the year that I would look at with Carolina and be like, if they don't win it this year, next year's going to be a little harder. Because all these other teams are just a year further in their progression. Ottawa's a year further developed. Ottawa's a year further. Buffalo is as well. Florida looks like we can't sleep on them. I mean, they've got some guys that they're going to be for a while. Look, I know everyone wants to, throw a funeral for the Bruins, but I think they're going to be right back there too. It might not look the same, but so I guess in the Eastern Conference is just, you got to just keep it going. And if I were the Devils, I would not mortgage their future, because what you've seen it happen this year. What happens when
Yeah.
all the teams are fighting with each other is a team like the Devils will just shoot up and be like second place in the Metro and on their way to potentially an ECF. That's gonna happen with one of these other teams. So if free agency goes in different directions, just bring the band back together in New Jersey and don't try to do anything cute, because when the dust settles in 2 or 3 years and all these other teams that aren't quite finished yet, like Carolina or Boston or Toronto, eventually they will be. Eventually, Austin Matthews is either going to get paid $1 billion by the Leafs, or he's going to end up in LA Kings. Like, who knows? So at that point, you guys will be so further developed than everybody else that it's not worth. You guys are in a unique situation. So I guess it depends team by team. I don't know. That's a long-winded answer.
No, I agree with that. I mean, we still have a lot of young. I think we still have like 2 first-round picks that we drafted that still haven't even played up in the NHL yet. So we still have plenty of talent down below. I mean, Luke Hughes is just a special case, so leave that out of the question. But we'll see. But I think these playoffs, though, overall, have been some of the best playoff hockey we've seen in probably years right now, a couple of years, I'd say. Just overall gameplay, physicality, close net games. So I think if you're not a hockey fan, I think it's
I'm going to take a pass on that opinion, but well, I mean, to be fair though, like if you're just looking from pure entertainment value, yes. Like if you're a Vancouver Canucks fan or a let's see, a Nashville Predators fan, or somebody else, and you don't have a rooting interest and you're just watching, and your team didn't make it to begin with, then yeah, I would agree with you. But like, I'm telling you, man, there was nothing exciting or fun about the last 3 games of the Bruins Panthers series. It was, I mean, have you ever read the book Old Yeller?
I have.
Right. You know what happens to the dog in Old Yeller? All right. That's basically how I felt at the end of that Bruins Panthers series. So, I mean, but if you're a Panthers fan, not that there's like maybe 12 of those in the whole state of Florida, but I mean, if you're a Panther fan, again, not sure how many of those exist, then I'm sure that experience was wicked fun. Likewise, the Devils beating the Rangers, I mean, that's pretty cool. That's like the Mets beating the Yankees, honestly. Like, and I know how you feel, right? A Jersey guy, I mean, New York this, New York this, New York this, and then Jersey sliding in there, stealing the thunder. So that, I mean, I guess one last thing I want to talk about the Devils before we move on, talk about the West real quick. Part of me wonders how good this Devils team would be if they went out last offseason, we're talking about off seasons, and there was a guy that grew up in, I believe, in Jersey, maybe in South Pennsylvania, who plays for the Blue Jackets now, Johnny Gaudreau. I wonder how much better the Devils would have been offensively if they took a bigger swing at Johnny Gaudreau last year.
Who signed him this past offseason?
The Blue Jackets got him.
Jackets. Probably. I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, probably would have had more chemistry than we would with Meyer right now. I mean, not saying Meyer's not like a great player and we have good chemistry with him. I just think they'd have more time to like work together, so it'd be more cohesion. But I don't know how that would impact us overall. I mean, we did it without. Look what we did without Timo Meyer. I mean, we stayed up as the top seed without. There's only one superstar really. Says number 2 seed, so it's like we did it with really not with goalies who no one even knew about.
Did it with coaching.
Guys,
I don't know. Vitek Vanacek had been a highly touted young goalie for a while when he was with the Washington system, but I know what you
mean. But like I think they did a great job at coaching, or the coaches did a great job at scouting of who to bring in and what they want to do. So I'm excited to see what the future holds for us, but we'll see what happens. I mean, we still got at least another 2 games. Hopefully we win. My prediction is that we'd win in at least 6 games.
Yeah, I don't know. Carolina's hard to read. They were like this last year in the Bruins series too, and they were like this a little bit with the Islanders last round. They're a hard team to read. I think the Devils would have been better. Obviously, would have been better this year if they had Gaudreau the whole year. Now that probably means maybe they wouldn't have taken a swing at Meyer, although I probably would have too. I wonder, so I wonder about that Columbus team because they've got a bunch of young studs. They got a ton of injuries though. Zach Werenski's their best defenseman, and he was hurt, and and I don't know if Line or Jenner or anybody else. I think Jenner might have struggled with some injuries, and Gaudreau, I don't know if he played the whole year, but I wonder about that Columbus team because they're going to be in the Bedard sweepstakes, and
yes,
that's something that we're going to talk about probably in our next podcast, or maybe later on in June. But that Connor Bedard sweepstakes, if the Blue Jackets can land him, they'll
be there.
They'll be better, and that's a team to watch as well. If some of these other teams start to fall. Okay, so in the West, real quick, what do you think of the way that's playing out? Seattle and Vegas and Dallas and all that.
It's hard-nosed hockey out there. I mean, it's really. I mean, the Oilers Knights. It's literally been game-to-game situation. I mean, you look at game 1, the Knights handled business, and then the game last night, the Oilers just backhanded them with 5-0, 5 goals to start off, 3 goals to start the.
It was literally like if you were playing NHL on the Xbox, at like 1 a.m. after like a few beers. Like that's what that game was like on rookie mode.
Yeah, it's been crazy out west. I mean, look what happened. The Dallas Stars come back. Joe comes and scores 3 goals to send it to overtime, and they still lose to Seattle in game 1.
Right. Yeah, Seattle's a good story. I think what the league would love the league's going to love what happens in the West no matter what, I think. Because if Vegas wins, you get Vegas involved. Like, they love that. And the Vegas has a ton of stars. And then if you get the stars themselves involved, then you've got that sort of Tyler Seguin, Jamie Benn, Joel Pavelski, some high-flying veterans looking for an angle to get another cup or to get their first cup. If you get the Kraken in there, you've got the newest team. And then obviously if you get the Oilers in there, you get McDavid, the best player in the world. I mean, so no matter what happens in the West, I think the league's going to be happy at who comes out into the finals. The East, I think
they're
Personally, I
concerned a
think
little bit.
they're a little disappointed, right? You've got Tampa, Boston, and New York out in the first round. Those are three huge hockey markets. Um, but at the same
But Toronto,
time, Toronto, if they're able to turn around that series, like this might not be popular here in our country, but if you got a Edmonton Toronto final, the country of Canada would be flipped on its head. You'd
they'll be
basically
fucked
cut
up.
a line down the middle of Canada and then carve out little areas, and it would be like tribal warfare.
Well, you'd have
Basically, everybody
a
would be
team.
rooting for the Oilers unless you lived in Ontario or Calgary. And then everybody there would be rooting for the Leafs, most likely. So um that would be a wicked fun series, just from a hockey perspective.
If they both made it, I believe it'd be a shootout. Whoever can score the last
Oh
goal,
my
because I
goodness.
don't really think either
Yes.
goaltender is close to a star. I think they've been very iffy. The Maple Leafs goaltender, Edmonton goaltender, like they've been very
Yeah.
iffy. I mean, I think the main goaltenders are all iffy goaltenders. To be
Oh yeah.
honest, I don't think any of the top five,
Absolutely.
maybe.
Well, because what was it, Campbell out there in out Edmonton
Yep.
used to be the goalie for the
No.
Leafs actually, and then out in Toronto it's been Ilya Samsonov. Um,
Yeah.
None of those guys really inspire confidence in me if I was playing D in front of them. But yeah,
I
I'm
mean, look at
thinking about,
the.
dude, what it would be like if you had Matthews and McDavid mano a mano, essentially offensively, with the cast of characters they both have with them in the Stanley Cup final. I mean, Tim Hortons would run out of coffee, like with the amount of energy that's would be emitting up there north of the border. So that would be pretty cool. Not gonna. I don't
Yeah, the
think
final.
that's gonna happen though.
I mean, the final score would be probably 8-7 every night, but you'd
Yeah,
have the league Stanley Cup Finals as off the charts.
right. I think that would be a lot of fun for the game. I think another good matchup. I think the matchup I would like is I would like the Devils. You're welcome. I would like the Devils and the Knights. I think that would be pretty fun. That's the one
I
I'm
think
going for.
story as well. You know, you have like the New Jersey Devil coming up to face the knight who's supposed to save the day, kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a
Fairy
little
tale.
bit of allegory there. Yeah, it would be fun on that way. It would be fun with the two coaches, right, with a chip on their
Mhm.
shoulder. Um, and then you've
Both
also
coaches,
got the whole thing of what was that?
I said potentially both their coaches are nominees for the Coach of the Year.
Yes, the Jack Adams Award. And then the other cool thing about Vegas and New Jersey would be sort of the Atlantic City versus Las Vegas, American uh, Sin City Cup or whatever. Um,
True.
anyway, I don't
So
know. I don't have a prediction. My predictions, I mean, I think pretty sure, yes, because the Avs, the Bruins, and the Rangers were all in my Final Four. They all lost in the first round. So
I still have
I also
my
said the
Final Four.
Bucks were going to be the best team in the NBA, and
Then look what happened.
yeah, they ran into the Heat. No pun intended. Well, yeah. What do you think is going to happen in the league, and then we'll move over to the NBA.
Like I said, my Final Four. I predicted either New York or New Jersey to go either way. It's the Bruins, but the Bruins are currently out. I was not expecting the Panthers to be
Keep
so
saying
red
that.
hot going to the next round. So, I didn't know what to think. So currently, right now, I kind of favor the Panthers more, unless
Yes.
Toronto shows me something tonight. If they don't show me anything tonight, they can't win tonight.
Yeah.
They're done.
I know the
They'll
game's
move
going on
on.
right now.
Last I checked, it was 1-0 Toronto.
Yeah,
Like I said, I fear right now Panthers. Unless Toronto turns it around. I like the Devils. I'm sticking with them. Like I said, 6 games. So then I picked the Knights to win it all. So I picked the Knights to beat Edmonton. I think I had them. I'll have them in probably about 6 games, and then Dallas, Seattle. I think that'll go to 7. and I think I'm going to go with Seattle. I think we're going to have the two newest teams
That
playing
would
in
be
the
cool.
Western Finals.
And they'll play each other in the Winter Classic next year too in Seattle, so that would be pretty neat. Um, yeah, I mean, I think just quickly that the league did a great job picking their expansion cities.
Mhm.
Look, a lot's been said about, you know, Arizona or Quebec or whatever's going on, but Hamilton, I mean, Kansas City, wherever. But I think what they've been able to do, maybe not with their location choices, but with the way the NHL expansion draft works, is it makes these teams competitive pretty fast. And
Correct.
and look, like Seattle's going to be a problem. I don't know if anyone's figured this out yet, but they're going to be an issue because Matty Beniers, I think, is one of the best young players in the league, and they're going to get Shane Wright pretty soon. I think he probably should have gotten number 1 overall last year, um, but he went back to Kingston to play in the OHL. I believe maybe not Kingston because that's where he played before he was drafted. But I don't know where, but he went back. He got some more time in the OHL.
Yep.
He's going to be good. And so you've also got McCann there, and you know Grubauer. We'll see, but like they've got some pieces there to really compete, and they've got some guys that do have like Yanni Gord has Stanley Cup experience. So
Correct. And
I
they'll have
think
some.
Seattle's going to be a problem going forward, just like Vegas was a problem once they got going and they got like Shea Theodore and Mark Stone and everyone, and now they've got Eichel.
And they got the right coaches, which also help their franchise out. They have two of the best coaches right now in the league.
Yeah, you know, and I think being an NHL fan, and I've gotten a lot really since COVID. Like during COVID, I deep dived into a lot of NHL history and watched a lot of old games and um, you know, spent a lot of time reading and now I'm like more well versed in the sport and how it works institutionally. And I think the league, there's so much parity in the league, right? Like I don't even know if you can call the President's Trophy curse a curse. It might just mean that the regular season is just a sorting mechanism, right? Because, and I'm not just saying this because the Bruins, I've sort of felt this way. Like the Kings, 11 years ago, won the cup, and you know this. They beat the Devils. They won as an 8 seed, right? And so I think the the league has so much parity now. The fact that a team like the Bruins this year, or the Panthers themselves last year, could be so dominant during the regular season and then lose in the first round or second round of the playoffs is just a testament to how competitive this league is. In the league we're about to talk about, um, I think has made strides themselves. Like I'm sure there's a lot of people that probably would have looked at the NBA and thought, okay, Bucks, Celtics, Eastern Conference Finals, book it, have a good night, we'll see you there, you know, but that's not what's materializing. And I think
No.
there's also a contingent of fans that would look at, oh, well, the Celtics own the 76ers in the playoffs. I think I saw a stat that was like Joel Embiid had only had one playoff win in his career against the Celtics or something like that prior to the series. And now it's 2-2. So I think a league that was once known with Cavs Warriors every year, Heat Warriors, whomever. I don't actually think the Heat and Warriors ever play each other, but you know where I'm going with that. Heat Spurs, Warriors Cavs was pretty much all we saw for like 8 years, and now it looks like there's some parity in that league too. So what do you think about the NBA playoffs? Like how
I,
just 30,000-foot view to start.
I think it's been a very interesting playoffs. I mean, I've always had hatred to the NBA. I've always disliked it. There's still retired Hall of Famers in the NBA who said the NBA is still boring. But I do think they're starting to make some better strides. I mean, like you said, the Heat with the upset, like to beat the Bucks, the team who was supposed to go on and basically win it all again. But they came up short. I mean, you also have talking about the New York Knicks, who everyone thought wouldn't have a chance of making it to this round right now and still have a chance to make it to the Eastern Conference Final. I mean, they got to play the Heat, but it's it's so interesting just how things are coming out. Like the superstar team with the Suns out west, like they may not even
right?
make it
Denver
to the
might. I think Denver's got a
like
pretty good chance of beating them.
Denver. Denver's hot, but they have also proven before in the past they've always come up short. But I think they have a better bench, which helps them the most to beat the Suns right now. The Suns gave everything away. Um, but interestingly, like we talked about in our last podcast with the Celtics, they've been so inconsistent since the turn of the new year, January, February. They just haven't been consistent. Like we saw in game one, they gave on the final shot. They didn't know who was going to take the last shot.
They did that, and then they did it today. They did it
Yep.
today.
It's
They
like
didn't know what
you
to
can,
do in the last 20 seconds of the game. It was like Harden gets the big shot, and then it's like,
yeah, I think they should have taken one out of the Lakers book and have someone else try to beat them. Like what was it, pull the last shot and they lost? It was a game
yeah, I didn't
one
watch it
game.
live because I was outside in my
I think it,
yard, but I missed the end. But the coaching is their problem. The coaching is the
yeah,
Celtics' problem. And look, I'm not a huge basketball guy. I share your sentiment. I don't love the NBA. I think the NBA had its golden age in the 80s and 90s, and now it's maybe the early 2000s. I mean, that's a discussion for another day, but I think its heyday of being like a true entertainment product is sort of gone. Um,
yeah,
and look, I'm not a big basketball guy to begin with, but just comparing the NBA playoffs to even March Madness, honestly, like is
yeah,
is just not the same. There's just not a lot of intensity, and like when you get into these late situations in these games, it's like today with the Celtics. This is what I was worried about with them. This is why I said at first I thought it was a Celtics conference until it wasn't, and then they showed me that they weren't really up to task. As you said, they were inconsistent in 2023, the new year. But then, I was high on the Bucks, but now the Bucks are out. But now I look back to the Celtics. It's the same question I had. It's like, what's Mazzulla going to do at the end of the game with timeouts? What's he going to do at the end of the game with if he needs to drop a play? And right now, it looks like his team needs him to coach. Eric Spoelstra, people used to give him a hard time early in his career because he had LeBron, D Wade, Chris Bosh, but like that dude coaches basketball, right? Like, sometimes we'd laugh and we joke like, "Oh, the Bulls didn't need Phil Jackson. I could have been out there if I had Jordan and Pippen and Rodman or Kerr or whoever else." But like the in the playoffs, NBA coaching does actually matter, and I think you've seen that. You've seen that this year with the Celtics. Even in the Atlanta series that they ended up winning, they had two ugly losses in that series. So I think coaching matters. We saw coaching matter in the NHL, right? Montgomery, who's a new coach in Boston, made a lot of mistakes, I think, in that series. Ultimately, it's always on
mm-hmm.
the players, but there was some coaching miscues there. And similarly, Mazzulla, a new coach for the Celtics, has sort of been exposed in some of these situations. And look, I'm not a big X's and O basketball guy. I can't really tell you what he should have done. But what I can tell you is there's a lot of other coaches in the NBA that would have assessed the talent that they had and made different decisions that benefited their team more.
Correct. Coaches would have made differences. I mean, look, it's going to be tough for them. I mean, we're tied. I mean, they're going back to Boston, so they're lucky. And since they are the higher seed, they'll have game 7 at home. But they lost game 1 to 76ers team, but didn't have the MVP of the year. They didn't have Joel Embiid. Then they beat in the next game when they had Embiid. So, like, you got to make your mind up what you want to do. Like, it's just, I mean, like I said, when we said earlier in the summer, like, if I still think it's going to hold true, if they don't win this year, I think the big three are going to break up. I just feel like it. It's just going to happen. And all Boston fans are going to be upset with what I'm saying, but it's the cold hard truth. Look what happened to all of Philly sports last year. They broke down and made it all the way to the finals, and what? Soccer, baseball, and I forget the other sport, football, all came up short. Like, say they have to Boston right now if they don't hold on to this. Like, they lost in hockey, could lose in NBA. Like, you bring in the talent and you just don't use it well enough. Does that make sense? Like, as a coach, you have to be able to utilize your
Yeah.
players, all of them, in certain situations. And like you said,
That's
I
what
don't think
Spoelstra does in Miami. I keep going back to that. I was just looking at Miami's series. If you just want to compare and contrast Miami, look, Miami's an 8 seed, right? See what you want, Jimmy Butler, Hero, whatever. I'm not an expert on the Miami Heat, but like they show up in the playoffs. Like they show up last year. They've sort of been a thorn in a lot of team sides. They just knocked off. Like I think he's the best player in the world, Giannis, the Greek freak. And so coaching does matter. And I think to your point about the Celtics, here's what's going to happen. And I'm pretty sure I said this back in the summer with Cam. I could be wrong. We got to have Cam on sometime soon, too, by the way. But I think I said this is Celtics. What's going to happen is if they don't win the finals, they're going to get the excuse bug, right? And look, this Celtics fans, like I'm a casual, sort of nomadic Celtics fan over here. So don't get mad at me, but you guys have been like on the doorstep of a championship for 7 years. And the IT Celtics and the early Kyrie, Gordon Hayward situation, all this stuff, you've been just 1 year, just next year, just next year, just next year. Oh, we'll just let the Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown mature one more year, one more year, one more year, one more year. That's what they should be called. They should get rid of the leprechaun in the middle of the floor and just put one more year. Because, look, I'm calling the pot calling the kettle black because the Bruins are doing the same thing, right? But we're not talking about them right now. The Celtics are doing the one more year thing just as much as the Bruins are. And their excuse, they've already got it lined up, is, oh, well, we had to fire our coach at the beginning of the year because of whatever. That's their excuse. That's going to be their excuse. They're going to say, well,
correct.
if we bring Mazzulla back for another year, it'll be he'll have a full training camp and whatever as the head coach. And
Could you imagine
full off season as the head coach with workouts and everything, and that will make the difference. That's going to be their excuse, man. I'm telling you. They're not.
Could you
they're
imagine?
Not, they're not going to change the roster at all.
Could you imagine though that Villa takes the Rockets to the playoffs and they go further than the Celtics do next year? If that happens, just a hypothetical. If that happens, and you already had that happen this year, and Bruce Cassidy moves on to the Knights, goes on farther than the Bruins.
Like honestly, like to me, I'm beyond the fact that both of them have made mistakes in the playoffs. Like the Mazzulla and Montgomery comparison, I think sort of ends there personally because like Montgomery was brought in under completely different circumstances. Yeah, you're right. They fired Cassidy and whatever, and they brought in Montgomery and all this stuff. But with the Udoka thing, it seems like they were kind of forced to do that because Udoka would just again, guys, just keep it in your pants. There's a million people that want to be NBA coaches out there, and then you get an opportunity, you blow it. All right, so just PSA, just freaking keep it in your pants. Then everyone can still be an NBA coach. But anyway, I think the comparison sort of ends there because like Bruce Cassidy, you're right, made it further. He's going to make it further than Montgomery. Udoka, we'll see what happens next year when he gets a job again. You said Houston. I don't know. Who knows? The things can turn on a dime in the NBA pretty fast too, in the offseason. Especially a team like that has a lot of money. But I wouldn't put too much stock into Udoka. I'm not really worried about that because like I think the Celtics would be where they were right now, regardless of if it was Ime or Joe Mazzulla. I think the problem is I think Ime was probably a little more equipped to deal with these late game things. I haven't seen from the Celtics games that I've watched this year, again, not as many as a lot of people probably. I haven't seen a lot from Missoula that instills like supreme confidence late in a basketball game. Whereas last year, there were some games where the Celtics looked much like they did against Philly today, but they would win those games. Like there were some games in the Heat series last year where it looked like the Celtics were dead on arrival in the fourth quarter, but Ime was able to make adjustments. I haven't seen that from Missoula so far in the postseason. So that's, if I was a hardcore Celtics fan, and we're going into Game 5, which is Tuesday. That would be my big concern. Is great. We made adjustments Game 1 to Game 2, and he likes to get cute in the press conference and talk about, does anyone want to ask me about the adjustments I made? I wonder if he's going to get cute in today's press conference, right? Like, here's the thing about the Boston coaches, and all of them do this. Alex Cora does this, Bill Belichick does this, and these two do it. Is they like to play cute with the media and be like, huh, I told you so. Well, the I told you so doesn't last very long if you go out and screw it up in the next game.
Correct.
Like,
I mean,
don't be an ass about it.
Don't sugarcoat it. Rather the coach be honest. And I mean, I've dealt with the years when they had that, when Jeff Fisher was the Rams coach for 8 years. So did. But I mean, it's tough. I mean, being a professional coach is tough, and they are held to high standards, just like the players are. But I don't know. I think that. Do you think the Celtics are going to win this series? Do you think they're going to come short against the 76ers?
I think they'll ultimately win it. I think they'll ultimately win it. The problem for the Celtics is going to be, how sustainable is this method of basketball?
Correct. I mean,
that's I think going to be where they begin to run into problems, because I think they're better on paper than the Sixers, and they got away with 2 games without Embiid, right? Like what happens if you go and you play the Heat, right? And you go down there and that place is loud, or if you go to the MSG or whatever, like the Wells Fargo
that's the one
Center,
team
I mean, they're not. The Wells Fargo Center isn't exactly like basketball mecca. I mean, they threw confetti when they went to overtime one year. I mean, the 76ers aren't a serious basketball team, honestly. And so, like, the Celtics might be able to get away with it in this series. Who knows? They haven't yet, but they might be able to. But, like, if you go against a team that's serious, like not the Hawks and not the Sixers, if you go play LeBron in the finals, or Steph in the finals, or KD in the finals, or Jokic in the finals, I mean, like we're dealing with some major adversity for this team. So I think they'll get it done, but I'm not holding my breath. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I see it going either way. I think it's going to go get 7 games. I think it's going to go to another 7 games. I mean, I feel like it's either they're going to come to Game 7, they're going to choke, like they've been doing consistently. They're not going to who takes the last shot once again, or costly turnovers at the end, coaching wise. And I feel like if either team has to play if the Heat does move on, either team has to play the Heat the way they're playing right now. I think the Heat is probably going to win in a sweep or 5 games.
Wow,
that's just how they're playing confidently. I mean, I can't count the Knicks out. I mean, the Knicks are still a good team, but like Jimmy Butler is just playing on another level, and I don't see anyone else.
Butler's different. He's built different.
I mean, you could say James Harden's kind of doing that right now for 76ers, but like I don't see anyone. I don't see Tatum doing that right now. I don't see Brown doing it. I don't see anything. From the Celtics doing that.
I think
right
Brown.
now.
I think Brown played pretty well. What was it in Game 3? I think.
Yeah.
And I think the Celtics are going to need. They're going to need some of their peripheral players to show that they have a deep bench, because I think like the Celtics do have a deep bench. I mean, Brogdon won 6th Man of the Year. I think Grant Williams is good. I think I think, Peyton Pritchard could, give you some big shots off the bench. But I think I'm missing Grant Williams, Peyton Pritchard. Oh my
There's a
God.
lot of guys.
Who's the Brogdon, Pritchard,
Williams,
Grant Williams? Who's the fourth one? There's their fourth bench player. That's oh God.
I can't think of the name.
Oh my God. I'm horrible at this stuff. I really am.
It's okay. It happens.
It doesn't matter. Never mind. I'm not gonna spend time looking up. They're gonna need some, like every good basketball team in the postseason. Gonna need some big
You need a
shots.
bench.
Big shots from some other guys too. And I think they can do that. So Kyle, we're running out of time here, but I think I gave my own opinion on the Patriots draft in my last podcast by myself. But what do you think about the Rams draft?
I mean, I love what the Rams drafted, even though they didn't have a first round pick. I think they had 14 picks. Yeah, 14 picks this draft, which is a lot of picks, but they weren't high picks. And I probably give their picks probably a solid B. I wouldn't say they're like outstanding picks, but like they picked up some good talent and picked up what they needed positional wise. Like they picked up your guy from TCU, Steve, right guard there. They need to beef up that O line. Like they were decimated last year. It wasn't even funny. But they also let a lot of guys walk this year. I mean, I think the Rams let go the most players this offseason so far, and they haven't signed anyone, I believe, or besides some returners, but they didn't sign a lot of guys back this year. They released a lot of guys just because they're over the cap. I think they're not getting ready quite to rebuild, but I think they're trying to make a comeback for at least not this upcoming year, but the year after, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
I have a question for you though. All right.
Yes.
I think you got a need. Your offensive line was a need after watching last year's debacle and the health problems y'all ran into. That was a need. My one question though is, now forgive me, did you guys pick a quarterback?
Yes, we did. We picked up the Georgia quarterback who won the two.
Okay, Stetson Bennett. Okay, all right.
Which
I should have known that. I should have known that. I should have screened that ahead of time and had that queued up as a question. So let me jump back into the time machine. All right. Now I'm here. I know that you've drafted Stetson Bennett.
Yep.
Do you think that was wise? Because I think it was. Now that I know that you did it. Because Matt Stafford
also played.
That's true. That's true. Also played for Georgia. Good point. Stetson Bennett probably is like, oh my God, I'm meeting Matt Stafford. He's probably starstruck out of his mind when they meet each other. Anyway, I think that was smart because Stafford is getting up there in age. And now this Stetson Bennett guy is like pretty old too. For a college draft. He's like not much younger than us. But my question is like, I guess now that I know you did that, I was sort of going to lead into that you needed to do that. But now that I know that you did, I guess my question is there a chance that Matt Stafford in 1 year or 2 years isn't the QB1 of the Rams?
I mean, his contract is for I think another 3 or 4 years, maybe. I can't remember which it is.
Right.
But he's only got a few. He's definitely going to be retiring. I don't see him playing much longer after. He's definitely going to retire a Ram. But I think this is a great pickup because one, you're basically preparing your quarterback for the future. And it's kind of like what you could say what Brett Favre and the Packers did with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to point to that. That was a great example. The other good one that everyone always looks to is Steve Young and Joe Montana.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't gonna go that far because I don't know if they're gonna be Hall of Famers like those two quite yet.
Or like the other two.
Definitely. But I do think that it's gonna help them tremendously in the future. I mean, they both went to Georgia, so they both have that history together, and I think like they're gonna have a great chemistry / bond together. So plus Matthew
Right.
Stafford hasn't been healthy and played the last few seasons, so you don't know if he's gonna be able to go. Plus, you have to pick up a guy who's won the national title, what, 1 or 2 times already
Two in
at
a row, yeah.
Georgia?
And he knows how to win. He knows how to win. I
Yeah.
think the thing with Stetson Bennett is he's going to go into training camp knowing he's going to be backup, right? And Matt Stafford's going to go into training camp and be like, I don't have to look over my shoulder at Stetson Bennett.
Yeah. Put
Right?
pressure on either.
That's healthy. That's healthy. Whereas like Mac Jones, he's going to look over his shoulder at Bailey Zappi in this coming training camp, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about that over the summer. But I think that's interesting for you guys going forward next year and seeing what McVay can do with a Stetson Bennett potentially in the future, because Stetson Bennett, much like Mac Jones, much like Max Duggan, right? Who Stetson Bennett beat in the national championship. They're going to be sharing a stadium together because he got drafted by the Chargers, which I found to be interesting. And Justin Herbert's certainly going to be the starter there for another decade probably, but interesting. But I think these guys that I mentioned are all good cerebral quarterbacks who perform well in a certain system. And we've seen what good coaches can do for good young quarterbacks. Joe Burrow and the coach there in Zach Taylor, yes. Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor and Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. You've seen it with oh my God, it's escaping me. Shanahan wants to do it with Trey Lance. I mean, these young coaches want their young quarterback, and I think Stetson Bennett isn't really that guy, but I think he could be somebody that McVay molds. Much like, I mean, he's learned from Kirby Smart, so it's not like he can't be coached. So I think that'll be cool. All right, I've come away from this podcast with knowledge of.
Oh, sorry.
No, go. I've just come away from this. I didn't know that you guys have Stetson Bennett. So this is like, I'm developing this thought as we're going on.
I mean, people were upset. It's like, oh, why didn't you pick, what was his name? Will Levis, who went to the Titans?
Oh, Will Levis. Dude.
People, why didn't they pick? I was like, well, quarterback's number one for us. And I don't want a guy who wants to try to play now, because I mean, Matthew Stafford's still able to play. I mean, you could say that our backup quarterback now is ready to play, but I think it's more important to think toward the future and not toward now, because you already have a quarterback for now, and I think you want to get fresh legs. And the only issue is that he's not a super tall quarterback. I think he's only like 5'9", I think is what he was put in as. I could be wrong. But like I said, I used the draft really well. I think the other big surprise I picked up was Zach Evans, the running back from Ole Miss.
Yes.
They had him
great year last year.
Like the top 5 best running back in college football. So like to pick that up, but also pick up a ton of basically defensive players. Like I really loved how they picked up, Kobe Turner from Wake Forest, who's basically described as the same height as Aaron Donald, and to play now on the same line as Aaron Donald to learn is just like you're preparing your future to like be what it was now, but actually have a coach who has been there and done that, versus when you had Jeff Fisher when they drafted Aaron Donald to kind of waste his first few years in the franchise for a few years. So now you like, I gotta put the shade on that.
Super Bowls. It wasn't like Jeff Fisher was like, some janitor from St. Louis high school. I mean, like he had
your average 8-8 coach. If you ever wanted to potentially make the playoffs, he's your guy.
Yeah, exactly. If you want an 8-8 coach, he is your guy. But listeners, if you want a hell of a podcast, we are your guys. Thanks for tuning in tonight, Kyle. I don't know if you had anything else to add, but
no,
my mental capacity is shrinking. It's the end of the weekend, and I have to somehow ramp up for the coming week. But I hope that you guys are able to do that by listening to this podcast. You can subscribe to us here on YouTube. Drop below. We'd love that. Kyle would love that. You can follow us on our Instagrams as well. Granddaddy Diezel, Will Highland too. Love that. You can follow the show on Instagram as well at Homefield Pod, and listen on audio wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back next month. Probably, man. We'll definitely know who's going to the Stanley Cup. We'll know who's going to the NBA Finals, and we'll probably have a better picture of the way the MLB is shaping. And we'll have maybe some more NFL rumors to talk about, as well as who the hell knows. We'll have the PGA Championship this month. I mean, May's a great sports month, as great as April was when we talked in April, talked about the Masters and all that. May's pretty good too, so we have a lot of good stuff going forward. All right, Kyle, thanks for coming on, buddy. Thanks for hooking up for the podcast, and thank you all to our listeners. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah.